Hello and welcome to Liberty Nation TV with your host, Jeff Charles. House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy has channeled his inner Newt Gingrich and presented the country with a legislative agenda for the GOP called the Commitment to America. The plan is getting both praise and criticism from the right, but will it be enough to convince voters to give the GOP control of the legislature? I have with me Liberty Nation's senior political correspondent, Tim Donner, to discuss. Welcome to the program.
Thanks, Jeff. Always a pleasure.
Awesome. I'm looking forward to digging into this with you. When I first saw that he was doing this, I was like, I got to talk to Tim about this. But before we get into it, can you kind of give us just like a quick overview of this Commitment to America?
Yes, it's based on four sort of fundamental basic pillars. And the way they describe it, the way that Kevin McCarthy described it when he unveiled it last week, south of Pittsburgh, sort of in the heart of blue-collar America. It's an economy that's strong, a nation that's safe, a future that's built on freedom, and a government that's accountable. And as someone has said, well, those are four goals that the Democrats could put out, right? And nobody would blink. But while the goals are very broad and designed sort of to uphold popular concepts which are appealing to both Republicans and independents, center and right of center of voters. You know, they use hot button and undoubtedly heavily poll tested language to talk about, like with the economic element, they focus a lot on runaway spending. We're now up to $30 trillion national debt. They talk really a lot about curbing inflation, of course, because that's a number one concern of Americans regarding the economy. They talk about cutting gas prices. And I think most significantly returning to Trump era energy independence, because that was a true achievement of the last Republican president. When they talk about safety, they're talking about securing the border, refunding police, curbing crime by stopping catch and release. And then they talk about social areas such as a parent's Bill of Rights in public education, expanding school choice, and taking on social media censorship. And then, of course, there'll be a ton of investigations. But that is, into the Biden administration. But those are the fundamentals of this very broad, very idealistic plan, which is clearly, as you say, based on contract with America, which I thought amusingly, it was kind of a slam dunk for Democrats that they called it Newt Gingrich's contract on America, which it's like, this is hell. He's going to try to take us out.
Wow. Yeah. They're taking out a hit on America. Yeah, that's going to do very well in 2022. But I've heard a lot of what you said, that it's overly broad. Some say that the plan lacks substance. So in your opinion, why do you think McCarthy and his team didn't get at least a little bit more granular on this?
Well, the main reason, Jeff, is because it's a consensus document. It's a document that's designed for all 460 Republicans running for federal office in the House and Senate to buy into and to use as a common theme, like the contract with America, which resulted in, the first time that Republicans had held the House in 40 years after the contract for America in 1994. Now, this is a consensus document in the sense that you have to be able to appeal to the most far-right elements of the party, like Marjorie Taylor Greene. And then you still have to appeal to the traditional conservatives that have sort of been the foundation of the Republican Party for a long time. So you had to get essentially conservatives and populists, moderates and Trumpists, so to speak, all on the same page. And this was the best they could do with a document. It took them a year to write this so that they could come up with the consensus language. But look at it like a presidential platform where different elements of the party argue over what's going to go into the 2020 Republican platform. They'll argue, they'll go back and forth, they argue about the language, and then they put it out. This is essentially the same, except for midterms.
Yeah, and it seems like he may have accomplished that goal. I mean, because Marjorie Taylor Greene, as an example, she praised the plan, as well as people who are more towards the center, moderate, traditional, or, I mean, we're all MAGA extremists now, so there really is no separation according to Biden. But
yeah, we're all a threat to the republic, right? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if you're pro-life, you are an extremist and you are a threat to the republic. That's what he said.
It certainly is.
Yeah.
I mean, unequivocally. So, and that just shows, that there is a level of desperation, Jeff, because if they feel like they have to not just demonize Trump, but demonize voters, that's a really high risk riverboat gamble. And you'd only do that if you're desperate and you didn't think that abortion and climate change and tax increases were enough to get you across the finish line.
I think you're right. One of the things I said on Twitter the other day is that MAGA extremists is all that they have left. But do you think that this promise, this commitment to America, do you think that this will have an impact on energizing the base? Will it help them to widen their lead over Democrats, which has kind of shrunk a little bit over the past couple months?
Well, there's been an ongoing discussion in the Republican Party over this year about whether to just go negative on the Democrats and their record and everything from Afghanistan to the border crisis to rising crime to inflation to an impending recession, all this. Mitch McConnell has implored the party to just stay negative and run as not Democrats, just like Biden ran as not Trump in 2020. McCarthy, on the other hand, has been pushing for a positive agenda. So you've got the Senate leader believing you should just point out all the flaws of Democratic leadership, and the leader of the House saying, no, we've got to have a combined positive message that can be carried forth by everyone in the party. So the danger of this, Jeff, I think, is if you get too watered down where you're saying they're awful. And by the way, here's what we're going to do, but we're not going to be too specific. I don't think that is really a danger for them, honestly, because you do have to present something to the voters other than the, what they now call whataboutism. Well, you may not like our platform, but what about the Democrats and the way that they've governed? I think what they're saying through this is that just a negative message is not going to be enough. And I've got to say, overall, I've got to agree with them from a political science standpoint. I mean, there's a lot of questions that they're going to bring up over the course of this campaign. For example, and McCarthy talked about this at the unveiling of his plan. What about COVID? Getting to the heart of COVID. Biden's done nothing about that. The origins of COVID. Afghanistan. There's been no accountability on Afghanistan. What about Merrick Garland calling parents essentially domestic terrorists for getting heavily involved in their child's public education? These are all the kind of things that they want to bring up, but those are kind of negative, and they wanted to have something positive to go along with hammering away relentlessly at Joe Biden, Pelosi, Schumer, and the rest of the party.
Yeah, you know what? And I saw what McConnell said. And when I first saw that, I was like, see, that is why the establishment is losing right now. That is why the non-establishment is starting to take over, because that approach is everything, not everything that's been wrong with the Republican messaging, but a big part of it. I've been pointing out with my platform that you can't just complain, you also have to present an alternative to the American people. So while McCarthy's plan may not be perfect, I'm sure it's not perfect. I'm sure when they get down into the details, there may be some stuff that I don't agree with. At least it's something to say, hey, America, Democrats have trashed the country. You're paying more at the grocery store. You're paying more in gas prices. Here's what we're going to do to fix it. That is
And
much better than just saying we're not Democrats.
Right. And I think what they're doing with this, which I think can't hurt, is really sharpening the distinction between the two parties, which within the establishment is not as great as most people think. But overall, between the parties, of course, they're more polarized than ever. So I think this sharpens the distinction in the mind of voters and reminds them of everything that's gone wrong with the Democrats. And it puts the focus on the right things. I mean, there's nothing in the commitment to America about climate change or about abortion, right? Or about raising taxes so that the rich will pay their still unexplained fair share.
Yeah. Well, the fair share is basically a goalpost that they move. So it just depends
Right.
on how
It's
they're
the fair.
feeling.
I love that's my favorite expression from the left is fair share because they never define it, but they keep using it.
Exactly. It's actually kind of brilliant if you think about it, because if you don't define it, then you can just make it whatever you want.
Well, whatever it is they're paying, it's not a fair share.
Yeah,
no matter
exactly.
what they're paying.
Yeah.
If it's 100%,
still not
that's
fair.
not a fair share. They should be going above and beyond and borrowing money.
Right.
Into the government coffers.
So the commitment to America, I mean, if this does help Republicans retake the House and Senate, it's a good short-term victory. And here's another gripe that I have with Republicans, because they tend to do things more short-term and not long-term. This isn't going to matter if they get into office and don't do anything about it. I think they may have some leeway because they don't control the White House yet. But do you think that some of these things are things that they can actually deliver on, whether Biden's in office or if they have to wait until 2024? I mean, are these things that they can actually accomplish, or what do you see?
I think that they have leeway, and a big part of the reason is because by design, they put together broad, lofty principles more than specific pieces of legislation that they propose to pass. So it's a somewhat different approach than the contract with America. And I think Newt Gingrich knew this too. When he put it out, there was a statement of principles, and it had a lot to do with them, winning the House for the first time in 40 years and the Senate for the first time in 10. So the first time they'd held both in 40 years. And the contract with America was something that once the election was over, people largely stopped paying attention. And I think knew they would do that because most of those things had to pass both the House and the Senate and be signed into law by the president. And they knew that the chances of that happening were small. So I think it was 8 out of the 10 items in the contract with America were passed by the House. But the Senate either didn't take them up or rejected them. Mm-hmm. And the one that didn't pass in the House was term limits, which is the most bipartisan issue of all. Right and left have agreed for decades that there should be limits on congressional terms, and that's the one thing they didn't deliver. So these things have to really be taken with a grain of salt. And so I think from a strategic standpoint, the Republicans are smarter to make the goals broader and more vague than more specific, at which point they create talking points for the Democrats in 2024 if they don't get them done.
Right, exactly. So, I mean, we're going to see in November how this helps or not. But when we play the long game, we're going to see more of how this unfolds. But we will definitely be keeping an eye on it here at LibertyNation.com. Thanks for joining the program, Tim.
Enjoyed it a lot. Thanks, Jeff.
Awesome. And remember, this show is proudly sponsored by LibertyNation.com, where you can access podcasts, breaking news and analysis, and a range of biting and brilliant shows to whet your appetite for freedom and your fondness for the great American Constitution. Just go to LibertyNation.com on your browser or hit Rumble, YouTube, or check out our Liberty Nation News Roku channel. I'm Jeff Charles. Thanks for watching. This program is a production of LibertyNation.com, where truth is making a comeback.
Entertaining, informative, and just plain fun. Watch Liberty Nation's The Conservative 5. Produced by conservatives for conservatives. C5's The Left Free Zone. Hosted by Liberty Nation's Lisa K. Donner. Joined by a raucous, irreverent panel of authors. Deconstructing leftist narratives. Debating the hot topics. And remembering to laugh. Join the official conservative safe
You only
space.
did that to piss Jeff off.
Liberty Nation's The Conservative 5.